The rain had not let up all night. It came down in sheets so thick that Boon Carter could hardly see the line where his corral met the rushing San Pedro River. The land around his cabin had endured storms before, but never like this. The river, usually a friend that gave water for his cattle, had swollen into a roaring beast that clawed at its banks as if eager to swallow everything in its path. Just before dawn, when the storm began to ease, Boon heard it. The faint, high-pitched cry of children carried on the wind. At first, he thought it was his imagination, the kind of trick sound a weary man hears after too many nights alone. But then the cry came again, desperate, cutting through the rush of the river. He grabbed his lantern and rifle, pulled on his boots, and ran toward the water. Through the mist, he spotted them. Two small figures clinging to a half-submerged log, being battered against the rocks. A girl, maybe 8, held tightly to a younger boy whose head bobbed dangerously close to the waterline. Their faces were pale with cold, their eyes wide with terror and exhaustion. Without thinking, Boon plunged into the current. The icy water bit into his skin, and the force nearly swept him off his feet. But he fought his way forward, step by step, until his hands closed around the log. "Hold on!" he shouted, though he doubted they understood. The girl clutched a leather pouch to her chest, even as Boon pried her free and lifted the boy onto his shoulders. The weight nearly drove him under, but with sheer will, he staggered back toward shore, dragging the girl by her arm until they all collapsed on the muddy bank. For long minutes, the children didn't speak. They only shivered violently, while Boon wrapped them in his coat and carried them toward the cabin. Inside, he stoked the fire until it roared, draped blankets across their shoulders, and spooned warm broth into their trembling hands. Slowly, color returned to their cheeks. The boy said nothing, his dark eyes following every move Boon made with unnerving focus. The girl, however, crouched near the hearth and began scratching shapes into the dirt floor with a stick. At first, Boon thought it was nonsense, the restless scribbles of a child, but the longer he watched, the more deliberate it became. 3 curved lines, over and over, crossed by a single straight mark. A symbol, a warning, perhaps. Boon leaned against the wall, rubbing his temples. He'd lived alone for 8 years, ever since Ruth died, and had kept peace with the tribes who ranged along the river. He traded fairly, respected their lands, and asked for nothing he wasn't willing to give. Yet now, with 2 strange children under his roof drawing symbols he could not understand, he felt the first stirrings of unease. When the first light of dawn slipped through the shutters, the girl opened her pouch, peered inside, then clutched it closed again. Whatever lay within was no child's trinket. Boon had the unsettling sense that it mattered more than his cabin, his land, maybe even his life. Then came the sound. Low at first, like distant thunder. The ground trembled beneath his boots. The children froze, their eyes locking on each other in silent recognition. They weren't afraid. They were expecting this. Boon stepped to the door and eased it open. Over the ridge spilled a sight that turned his blood cold. Warriors. Dozens, no, nearly 100, riding in perfect formation. Their horses moved as one, their feathers glinting in the morning sun. At their head rode a man tall and unyielding, his bearing marked by authority and fire. Boon's grip tightened on his rifle. He'd rescued 2 children at dawn. Now their father was coming for them, with an army at his back. The thunder of hooves grew until it filled the valley, shaking the timbers of Boon Carter's cabin. He stepped onto the porch, rifle held low, every instinct torn between fight and surrender. The children followed him without hesitation, one on either side, as if they belonged there, as if they had already chosen him. The riders came to a halt in unison, a wall of horseflesh and painted warriors stretching across his pasture. Dust rolled forward and settled like a shroud. Not one man moved until the leader raised his hand. In an instant, 100 horses stilled, nostrils flaring, muscles quivering under the morning sun. The silence that followed was deeper than the storm itself. Boon swallowed hard. He recognized the man at the front before a word was spoken. He had seen him once at a distance during a trading gathering near Tucson, Chief Kestrel of the Northern Wind, a man of legend, respected and feared in equal measure. If these were his children, then Boon had unwittingly stepped into the center of something far larger than himself. The girl broke from Boon's side and sprinted across the open space, calling out in her own tongue. Kestrel dismounted and dropped to one knee, scooping both children into his arms. Relief washed across his features, softening his fierce bearing for a fleeting moment. The warriors behind him eased their grips on their spears. But when the reunion ended, Kestrel rose to his full height. His eyes, dark and sharp, settled on Boon. He spoke in careful English, the kind that came from long practice. "I am Kestrel. These are my children." Boon lowered his rifle, but did not put it away. "Name's Boon Carter. I pulled them from the river during the storm." Kestrel's gaze hardened. "My children do not wander to the river. Someone took them there." The words landed heavy. Behind him, warriors shifted in their saddles, their silence carrying the weight of judgment. Boon felt his chest tighten. He'd saved those children, yet he now stood accused of something darker. The girl, Ayanna, he would later learn, spoke quickly, pointing to Boon, to the river, to the small pouch she carried. She opened it and showed her father a carved piece of bone. Kestrel froze, turning the object in his hand. His face, carved from stone a moment before, went pale. "This belonged to my father," he said quietly. "Buried with him at Devil's Bend." Murmurs rippled through the warriors. Sacred ground had been disturbed, a law broken, a crime worthy of blood. Boon's stomach dropped as he realized the trap. Someone had wanted this. Someone had sent those children to the river, knowing he would take them in, knowing what they carried would bring 100 warriors to his door. Kestrel stepped closer, his voice low but sharp. "You saved my children. For that I am grateful. But you hold what no white man should touch. Someone wants me to believe you are guilty, and unless we find the truth, my people will demand justice." Boon gripped the rifle tighter, though his hands shook. He had faced storms, wild beasts, and the lonely ache of years spent in silence. But never had he felt the full weight of history bearing down upon him. The carved bone glinted in the chief's hand, heavy as a death sentence. Boon Carter stood stiff on his porch, sweat prickling his neck despite the cool morning air. 100 warriors stared at him in silence, the only sound the restless shifting of horses. His rifle felt useless in his hands, more like a burden than a weapon. He couldn't shoot his way through this, not against numbers like these. Chief Kestrel held the carved bone with both hands, reverence and fury warring across his face. The smooth surface bore markings Boon couldn't decipher, but the way the warriors reacted left no doubt. This wasn't just a relic. It was sacred. "This bone," Kestrel said, voice carrying like thunder across the yard, "was buried with my father. His resting place is sacred ground. To disturb it is to invite blood payment." The murmurs behind him grew louder, A ripple of anger. Boone's stomach turned cold. Blood payment. He'd heard the phrase whispered on the frontier, punishment swift and merciless for desecration. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The children stepped forward. The boy, Takakota, pointed to the dirt where he and his sister had been scratching symbols earlier. His small hand traced the lines again. 3 wavy marks, cut through by a single straight one. Boone recognized it now. It wasn't childish play. It was a message, a warning. Ayana spoke urgently in her father's language, her voice rising and falling like a storm wind. She gestured toward the hills beyond Boone's ranch, toward the tree line where shadows lingered. Kestrel's expression shifted, hardening further, then snapping toward Boone with a look that pierced through bone. My daughter says a man followed them yesterday, a rider with a scar upon his cheek. Boone's pulse kicked hard. He had seen no one near the river, no stranger on horseback, but the boy nodded solemnly, his small finger tracing a line down his face in mimicry. Kestrel's jaw clenched. Marcus Gann, he spat, the name burning in the air. A man who wears false words like armor. A translator who once betrayed my people. He knows our sacred places. Boone blinked, the trap becoming clearer. You think he planted that bone? To make it look like I desecrated your father's grave? Kestrel didn't answer immediately. He turned the bone in his palm, studying the symbols, then lifted his gaze to the line of warriors. Perhaps. But my people demand certainty. They demand justice. The circle of men seemed to tighten, their stillness heavier than any advancing army. Boone felt the press of history, of law not written in books, but carved in memory and blood. I didn't take your children to the river, Boone said finally, forcing his voice steady. I pulled them out before the water killed them. That's all. If this Gann wants you to believe otherwise, then he's the one you're after, not me. Kestrel's eyes narrowed. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he lifted his hand, a single commanding gesture. Half the warriors wheeled their horses and thundered toward the hills, following the children's account. The others stayed, watching Boone, waiting. Kestrel stepped closer until the 2 men stood nearly face to face, the carved bone glinting between them. If my children speak true, then you are caught in a web not of your making. But understand this, if you lie, if you had a hand in disturbing my father's rest, nothing in this world will save you. Boone met his gaze, heart hammering. Then I'd best help you find the truth. And for the first time, the chief's expression shifted. Not forgiveness, not trust, but the faintest flicker of consideration, as though the rancher's words had earned him a moment more to live. The morning dragged with the weight of an execution postponed. Boon Carter sat on his porch, the carved stone the old man had given him still pressed into his palm, as if it might shield him. Around him, Kestrel's warriors waited in their silent formation. They hadn't dismounted, hadn't spoken, hadn't taken their eyes off him. It was like living under the judgment of 100 statues. Every sound carried. The creak of his corral fence, the restless pawing of his mare. Even the whisper of wind seemed louder than usual. Boone's nerves burned raw. He tried to keep moving, feeding stock, drawing water from the well, but the eyes followed, sharp and unwavering. Near midday, a cry echoed from the hills. All heads turned. Riders approached, the scouting party returning. Dust boiled behind them as they galloped into the yard, dragging a bound man between 2 horses. Boone's breath caught. Even at a distance, the scar was unmistakable. A pale line ran down the stranger's cheek, twisting his mouth into something cruel. His eyes darted like a cornered animal's, calculating every angle. The warriors hauled him from his horse and forced him to his knees in the dirt. His voice came quick, oily, practiced. "Chief Kestrel, thank the Lord you found your children. I've been searching for them myself. Rode all night after the storm." Kestrel approached, his face carved from stone. "My son says you spoke to them, told them their grandfather called from the river." The scarred man, Marcus Gone, flinched just slightly. Then he smiled, thin and sharp. "Children misunderstand, Chief. The storm frightened them. Their memory is clouded." Ayana stepped forward, clutching her pouch. Her small voice cut through the silence. "Not clouded. You said grandfather's bones would make Papa proud. Said to bring them to the White Rancher." Gone's smirk faltered. Murmurs rippled through the warriors. Takakota added in halting English, "You say, spirit calling. You say, reward money." Gone's eyes flicked between them, then to Boon. For a heartbeat, the mask slipped. Rage twisted his face before he smoothed it away with false calm. "They're children. They imagine things." Kestrel didn't move. His hand lifted, and a warrior opened Gone's saddlebag. Papers spilled onto the ground. Maps, notes, sketches, and more pouches, each containing carved bones, older than any man present. The chief lifted one, his jaw tight. "This belonged to my grandfather's grandfather, buried 60 winters past. How did you come by it?" Gone's face went pale. "Found them scattered by the riverbank." Lies hung in the air like smoke. The evidence, the children's words, the scar, all pointed to him. Boon felt something cold settle in his gut. He understood now. The storm, the children, the planted bone. It had all been a trap. A snare meant to see him cut down, to erase the truth along with him. And yet, as Kestrel turned the bones in his hands, his dark eyes settled once more on Boon. "The law of blood payment demanded your life this morning," he said, voice low and heavy. "Now it may demand another's." Gone spat into the dirt. "You think the territorial authorities will side with you over me? I am the translator of law. I am the voice that binds treaties. Without me, your words mean nothing." The arrogance made Boon's stomach twist, but it also told him one thing clear as the sunrise. Marcus Gone was afraid. Afraid of what had been uncovered. Afraid of what might come next. The rancher met Kestrel's gaze. "You wanted the truth, Chief. There it kneels." The circle of warriors closed tighter, shadows falling across the scarred man. The air hung heavy, thick with the weight of judgment. Marcus Gone knelt in the dust, wrists bound, lips curled into a defiant sneer. Around him, the circle of warriors closed like a living wall, their silence more damning than any shouted accusation. Boon Carter stood at the porch edge, hands clenched, heart pounding. He had seen killers before, men driven by hunger, greed, or plain desperation. But Gone's kind of evil was different. Cold, calculated. He used words like blades, treaties like rifles. Where others fought with lead, this man fought with lies. Chief Kestrel raised the carved bone high, his voice carrying like thunder across the yard. "This was buried with my father. It should never see the sun. Yet this man carried it in his pouch, with others stolen from our ancestors. He used my children, poisoned their hearts with tricks." Gone's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Superstition, old bones in the ground. You think the law of the territory cares about such things?" Before Kestrel could respond, a shout rose from the perimeter, riders approaching fast from the east. Dust trailed against the horizon. Soon the glint of badges appeared. Territorial officials, half a dozen of them, mounted and armed. Gan straightened, hope flashing in his eyes. "Commissioner Walsh," he called, voice slick with false relief. "Thank God! These savages have taken me prisoner." The riders pulled into the yard. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with silver hair and the weight of authority, dismounting with deliberate care. He surveyed the scene, 100 warriors armed and grim, a white rancher standing tense, and a bound translator kneeling in the dirt. "I am Commissioner Walsh," he announced, voice commanding. "We received reports of unrest near Devil's Bend. Explain yourselves." Gan seized the moment. "Commissioner, I was conducting lawful surveys when I was set upon. These tribesmen accuse me falsely. They threatened to kill me over artifacts I found washed along the river." Walsh's eyes narrowed, flicking to the bones in Kestrel's hands. "Artifacts, you say?" Kestrel stepped forward, voice calm but iron hard. "Not artifacts. Sacred. Taken from graves." He held out the carved bone for Walsh to see. "This belonged to my father, stolen by the man you call translator." Walsh examined the piece, his face unreadable. "Mr. Gan, is this true?" Gan's words came fast, rehearsed. "Exaggerations. They twist things to undermine progress. These people never wanted the treaties in the first place. They'll say anything to discredit me." Boone's patience snapped. He strode forward, holding up the survey notice Gan had nailed to his fence only last week. "Commissioner, this bears his signature. Dated yesterday. Yet he claims he was searching for missing children all night. You can't be in two places at once." The yard fell silent. Warriors, rancher, chief, all watching the commissioner's face. Walsh studied the document, then looked at Gan. For the first time, doubt clouded the translator's confident smirk. From beside Kestrel, little Ayanna spoke clearly, each word pronounced like a bell. "Scarman came 3 days ago, said our grandfather's spirit called from the river, told us to bring bones to white man." Takakota nodded solemnly, said bones make peace, said father be proud. The children's voices cut sharper than knives. Even Walsh could not dismiss them. He motioned for Gan's saddlebags to be searched. Papers spilled out, maps of burial grounds, forged treaty notes, and a list of names with amounts beside them. Bribes. Walsh's own deputies stiffened as they saw colleagues' names written clear. The commissioner's face paled. He turned back to Gan, voice like stone. "You will answer for this!" Gan spat in the dirt. "Answer to who? These savages? This dirt farmer? I serve progress." Kestrel's hand hovered near his knife. The warriors bristled, ready to mete out their justice. Boone's pulse thundered. One wrong move, and blood would spill like water. The choice now hung on Walsh, whether to uphold justice or shield corruption. The yard at Boon Carter's ranch had become a courtroom under open sky. The wind stirred dust across the packed earth, where Marcus Gan knelt, bound, his eyes sharp with defiance. Around him stood the warriors of Chief Kestrel, their painted faces unreadable, their silence louder than any gavel. Commissioner Walsh faced Gan with the evidence spread across a saddle blanket. Forged survey papers, grave markers stolen from Devil's Bend, and the damning list of corrupt officials who had profited from his lies. "Mr. Gan," Walsh said, voice steady, "these documents alone would see you imprisoned. The testimony of children makes them undeniable." Gan's smirk faltered, but didn't break. "Children lie. Chiefs exaggerate. You think any court will take their word over mine?" Ayanna stepped forward before anyone could stop her. The little girl lifted her chin, her eyes flashing with the same determination Boone had seen when she'd refused to hide. He said grandfather's bones make medicine for white men. He said to bring them to Rancher so father would be proud. Her words, spoken in careful English, rang with the clarity of innocence. The effect was devastating. Warriors murmured low, their anger simmering like coals. Walsh's deputies exchanged uneasy glances. Gan barked a laugh, but it sounded hollow. "You call that evidence? Folklore and children's chatter?" He turned toward Walsh, voice rising. "You know the law, Commissioner. Their traditions mean nothing under territorial statute. What matters is expansion, development, order." I was doing my duty. Boon stepped forward, anger pushing past his usual caution. "Duty? You tricked children into desecrating their own grandfather's grave. You poisoned trust, twisted words, and tried to have me killed to hide your crimes. That's not duty, Gan. That's treachery." Gan's eyes snapped to Boon, sharp as blades. "And what are you, Carter? A dirt rancher clinging to land you don't deserve? You think they'll call you a hero? They'll use you until you're dry, then cast you aside. You'll die forgotten, while men like me shape the future." The words stung, but Boon saw something else. Fear behind the bravado. Gan was cornered, and his tongue was his only weapon. Chief Kestrel raised his hand, silencing the yard. "Our law is clear. Desecrate a grave, and your life is forfeit. By our ways, his blood should feed the earth today." A ripple of agreement passed through the warriors. Gan paled, for the first time seeming to understand the true danger. Walsh hesitated, torn between laws written in Washington and justice demanded on the frontier. "By territorial law," he said carefully, "theft of sacred artifacts, fraud, and corruption merit prison, not death. But," he glanced at the gathered warriors, then at Boon. "This land was stolen through Gan's forgeries. If the treaties were false, they must be voided. Commissioner or no, I cannot deny that." Gan spat in the dirt. "You'll undo years of progress for the word of savages and a lonely rancher? You'll regret this." But the tide had turned. Walsh straightened, his silver hair catching the morning sun. "I regret only that men like you wore the mask of authority. Marcus Gan, you are under arrest. You'll stand trial in Denver, and every paper you forged will be laid bare." The warriors stirred, restless. Some wanted blood now. Boon felt the tension like a storm pressing against the earth. One spark, and the yard would explode into violence. He stepped into the center, raising his voice so both sides could hear. "Kestrel, Commissioner, there's another way. Blood for blood won't build peace, but truth, laid open for all to see, that can." For a moment, silence. Then Kestrel's eyes met Boon's. The chief's gaze softened, just slightly. "You would trust their courts to deliver justice?" Boon's throat was dry, but he forced the words out. "If they don't, then the world will know, and I'll stand beside you until it's finished." Kestrel studied him long, then nodded. "So be it. His blood is spared, for now. But his lies end here." Gan sagged in his bonds, relief and rage battling in his expression. He was alive, but no longer untouchable. The trial of words was over. But the real fight, proving the truth in courts and reclaiming stolen land, was only beginning. The sun slid lower over the plains, painting the horizon in streaks of copper and rose. Boon Carter stood apart from the crowd, staring at the familiar fence line that had once marked the limits of his world. His ranch, 3 miles of river frontage, the small cabin, the corral Ruth had insisted on building, was his life's work. Yet now, as warriors murmured around the captive Marcus Gan, and Commissioner Walsh debated his next steps. The land felt heavier than ever before. Kestrel approached, his children trailing him. Ayanna clutched her father's hand. Takakota walked with the solemn dignity of a boy who had spoken truth when it mattered. The chief studied Boon in silence for a moment before saying, "You stood between our anger and this man's life. That was not easy." Boon shook his head. Killing him wouldn't change what he did. But if the truth spreads, if his forgeries are exposed, it can undo years of damage. Kestrel's gaze drifted to the river bending beyond the fields. The land he stole is still gone. Our sacred places still cut away by lies. A prison sentence in Denver does not feed children or return what was taken. Boon swallowed hard, the decision forming inside him like a stone dropping into deep water. What if it could? Kestrel raised an eyebrow. "My ranch borders Devil's Bend," Boon said slowly. "The water rights, the grazing land, it was never truly mine to begin with. If we redrew the boundary, you'd have your sacred ground back. The cabin could stay as neutral ground, a meeting place, a bridge, not a wall." Ayanna's eyes lit up with something like hope. She whispered to her father in Lakota, her voice quick and earnest. Takakota nodded fiercely beside her. Kestrel's expression softened, but his tone was measured. "That is no small gift, Boon Carter. Few men would part with land willingly." Boon looked toward the cabin, remembering Ruth's laughter on the porch, the quiet nights of loneliness since her passing. "I've been alone too long. Land doesn't keep a man warm. Family does. Community does. Maybe this was never meant to be just my place." Commissioner Walsh, overhearing, stepped closer. His brows knit with surprise. "Mr. Carter, are you certain? You'd be giving up prime river frontage. Once gone, there's no returning it." "I'm certain," Boon said. "I'd rather see it serve both our peoples than sit as a monument to my stubbornness." The chief's hand settled on Boon's shoulder, firm and steady. "You speak like a man who understands both worlds. My daughter asks if you would consider becoming family. To us." Boon blinked, struck speechless for a moment. "Family? It means a place in our lodge, a voice in our council. It means when we speak of bridges, you are the one who carries people across." Emotion welled in Boon's chest. He looked at Ayanna and Takakota, who smiled at him with trust that pierced deeper than any wound. He thought of Ruth, of the loneliness that had defined his days. Slowly he nodded. "Then maybe it's time I stop being alone." Kestrel gave a rare smile. Around them, warriors began murmuring approval. Walsh let out a long breath of relief, already imagining the territorial disputes this decision might prevent. As dusk fell, Boon knew the choice had been made. Tomorrow, his land would change hands, and so would his life. He was no longer just a rancher. He was becoming something more, a bridge between two worlds that had too often lived in mistrust. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, the river glinting like molten silver as it curved around Devil's Bend. Boon Carter stood with Kestrel and Commissioner Walsh beside a flat boulder that served as an impromptu council table. Warriors formed a semicircle on one side, Walsh's men on the other. Between them lay documents, ink still drying, that redrew the boundaries. Walsh cleared his throat. "By agreement of both parties, the river frontage and sacred ground surrounding Devil's Bend are hereby returned to the people of the Northern Wind. Mr. Carter relinquishes all territorial claim. The cabin and adjoining acre remain neutral meeting ground." He pressed the seal with deliberate weight, the wax cooling into permanence. A cheer rose from the gathered warriors, not a war cry, but something softer. Relief carried on the morning air. Kestrel turned to Boon. Few men give up land without being forced. You have chosen freely. That choice will be remembered. Boon felt the weight of the moment sink into his bones. He had carved the ranch with his own hands, every fence post and beam of the cabin a monument to survival. But as he looked at Ayana and Takakota, their small faces glowing with pride, he realized this surrender was not loss. It was renewal. Marcus Gahn, bound and scowling, was hauled forward. His fine clothes were torn, dust smeared across his scarred cheek. Commissioner Walsh addressed him with cold authority. "Mr. Gahn, you will be escorted to Denver to face trial for fraud, theft, and corruption. The evidence is overwhelming. Your confession recorded. The treaties you falsified are void." Gahn spat into the dirt, muttering curses, but no one listened. His power had drained away like water through sand. He was no longer a master manipulator, just a man caught in his own web of greed. When the soldiers led him away, Ayana whispered to Boon, "The river washed him out, just like the storm." Boon squeezed her hand gently, thinking she was wiser than her years. That afternoon, the entire village gathered on Boon's land one last time. Women cooked venison over open fires. Children darted between horses, and warriors sang songs of remembrance. Kestrel raised his hand for silence. "Today, we honor Boon Carter, who saved my children, who gave back sacred ground, who chose to be family. From this day, he is Tonkala, brother and bridge builder." The word rolled through the crowd, repeated from voice to voice until it felt carved into the air itself. Tonkala, brother. Boon felt his throat tighten. He wasn't a man given to speeches, but he found his voice. "When I pulled 2 children from the river, I thought I was just saving lives. I didn't know I was saving myself. You've given me more than I've given you. Purpose, belonging, family. I'll never forget that." As night fell, torches ringed the gathering. Music rose, drums, rattles, voices weaving together in harmony. Boon sat with Kestrel near the fire, watching Ayana and Takakota laugh with their cousins. For the first time since Ruth's death, his chest felt light, unburdened. He turned his eyes toward the river. Its current moved steady and sure, carrying away storms, carving new paths, healing wounds in its own relentless way. He realized he was like that river now, no longer confined to fences and solitude, but part of something larger, something flowing. When Kestrel's hand settled on his shoulder, Boon didn't flinch. He belonged. And somewhere in the night wind, Boon could almost hear Ruth's voice, soft and approving, whispering that he had finally found home.